Okay, so back at the bus here on Sunday. Today's project is to get this door frame fabricated because it has bearing on how much metal's going to go above it. So we progress over with overlaps. I don't want to skip the door area. So I'll do the door framing. Assuming that goes well, I may even get to this panel here before the day's work is over. So, and if things are going extra good, yeah, it's a pipe dream, but I may get started prepping that side. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is prep this metal by getting the surface rust wire wheeled off of it. These are three 10-foot lengths of 1.5 by 1.5 by 1/8 angle iron. Be plenty strong for a door jamb. So I'm going to hit it with primer so that dries while I'm finishing the demolition around the door, and then that way I can cut and weld these pieces and they'll already be primed and dried. So this is the first step today. Okay, so I'm also going to use this 6 feet of this 7-foot length of steel tubing, 2-inch square. This will be the header and the footer of the door. The wall thickness is almost exactly 2 inches, so this will work out pretty nicely. It'll give me a nice four surfaces to work with. That way I can rivet some sheet metal to the side nicely at the bottom and top, and then in the back I'll just put a lip on it with some other metal as part of the door jamb. But anyhow, this ought to work out nicely. Should have plenty of metal for that fabrication here. So I'll get the angle grinder running and wire brush this up and paint it. Okay, so over there I got the first little piece primed up after sort of wire wheeling it, getting the rust off. Next is this piece. You can see I was starting there before I remembered to turn the phone on here. So I'll get that ground up and painted, and then the other three. Okay, so got the grinder and rattle can going. I've got 2 more pieces left to do here, and then I'll have the priming done and I'll be able to start a little bit of demolition around the door frame inside, and after that we'll get to fabricating. Okay, so I got these pieces of angle and tubular steel all painted up. We're going to let them dry while I go inside and finish demolition on the door frame so we can get started building. Okay, so I was able to remove these pieces easily just by sliding them out. Now I'm going to take that hinge off with the bolts that are going into the hat channel right there. Okay, so I got that hinge unbolted. Use the angle grinder for one bolt that I just couldn't get off. It was rusted too much. But that's a pretty heavy duty hinge. I might end up using that to make the skylight that's going to go up there. You know, given that it held a door on, that would be a pretty serious hinge for a skylight. So, but that'll allow roof access from the bed, which is the plan. We're going to have a lounging area for stargazing on the roof above the bed, and a hatch right above where our heads will go on the bed. So that'll be pretty nifty. Okay, so I just slotted the heads on these rivets going down this trim piece. I'm going to get the pneumatic chisel out, pop them off, then I'll cut a line right above there where the new piece of metal is going to be reskinned, and then I'm going to trim up the edge of this so that I can start fabricating the door. Okay, so I used the handy dandy pneumatic air chisel tool, pop those rivets. I had already slitted the bottom so this would slip out, and now I can just pop this off here. Well, there we go. So that piece is off. Fairly heavy gauge metal for trim, actually. And now the hat channel's exposed, and I'm going to slot that down here slot this line down on the edge. Most likely make it flush here with the hat channel. So that's what's up next here. More angle grinding. Okay, so I'm slotting here with the angle grinder so I can remove that right angle piece. And after that, I'll trim up so that the edge of this hat channel's flush with the outside sheet here. And that'll give me a nice surface to work from for measurements and fabrication. Okay, so that trim piece fell off. I've got to smooth that out a bit with the edge of the hat channel. I'll get the other grinding wheel on to do that. Okay, so I'm trimming this edge up, and I'm going to use these as guides to lay the 2-inch square tubing on. That one and that one. And I've got to take that hat channel, lower it a little bit so that the square tubing can go into place. And then after that, I'm going to grind that hat channel cap down a little bit. I'm trying to go for 36 1/4 because I'm going to have a layer of 1/8" angle iron that's going to add some width. So that times 2 is 1/4 inch, and it may even need to be a little bit wider than that even if I decide to do 2 layers. So I got to think through that plan a little bit before I fabricate. Okay, so I've carved that to the point where I'll be able to wedge in the 2-inch piece of square tubing and use the remaining structure there to kind of get it evened out, so to speak. I'm going to probably measure off that yellow piece since it's flat. Just got to grind it and prime it. And then I'll use that to build up from, so that I have sort of the right level, or a level surface anyway, or as level as you can get on a bus. So that's the plan. We'll build up from that yellow surface, probably with a couple of angle iron pieces cut at the same length, maybe 2 or 3 angle iron pieces, and we'll use those to support the 2-inch steel. Kind of jumping around a little bit, I'm going to grind the back of these rivets out so that I can put a hat channel cap over this hat channel. I'm probably going to fill with some of the scrap hat channel that came out of here. I'll have to measure it. I'm probably going to fill that gap so it'll be 2 layers thick and very strong. That's where the hinge is going to be mounted, so I'd rather it be at least a couple layers thick. Okay, so I ground the back of the rivets, and then I use the air impact tool to pop them out. So now we can put a hat channel cap on this. Okay, so I have that hat channel clamped in place. So at this point I've got hat channels running straight up on both sides. I'm going to have to weld that at the top. I'm going to tack it at the bottom. I'm not sure if I'm going to run bolts into that or not. Probably will. Yeah, probably run bolts into it. And then it'll get, the 2 will get joined when I fill with the scrap hat channel in the middle for a double layer. Okay, so I cleaned up that surface and primed it. Now I can use that as my surface to level from, to put the 2-inch steel threshold in, which will kind of go above this. It'd be kind of smart if I had some spray foam handy. I just don't. Maybe I'll get a vacuum and then suck some of that nasty stuff out. Okay, so I fabricated these pieces as sort of like standoffs, all 2 7/8 inches tall. And this piece here, I fabricated and I notched so that it will end up being even with the skin. Although I do need to check that real quick. This side looks pretty good. I may want to notch that a little bit more before I put it in. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to give myself a little play on both sides. Okay, so I am riveting these standoffs in place. Once I have the crossbar where I want it, I will weld this up in the edges inside and in between these pieces and so on. But for now, I'm putting a couple rivets in each, or one or two rivets in each, and we'll get them positioned. That way they won't keep falling every time I try to tap the bar down. Okay, so I have these 3 standoffs in place. They will support the 2-inch steel piece. I'm about to try to fit that again. Once I am satisfied with it, then those will get welded, and the 2-inch piece as well will get welded all together. And then this piece here, I'm going to remove the hat channel. I've started cutting it right there, and my intention is to maybe find a piece of hat channel to run straight across under the door. I think that'll look nice. I'll start with a piece of just basic sheet metal first to cover it, but eventually I'll get a straight section of hat channel to cover the door base with, and that'll make it look like a nice line. Okay, so there it is with the base in place. I'll have to get a level, or actually probably I'll just square it against the hat channels on each end with a square. I have that inside. Let me try that. That'll be the way to make sure it's in the right position. Okay, so I got the welder fired up here. I'm going to weld these little pieces in first, and then I'll even this out with the square on both sides and tack it in place. Okay, so this old square is telling me it's about as good as it's going to get. Looks that way from both sides, so I'm going to tack it up that way. Okay, so I welded up the threshold. There's quite a big gap here. It's pretty ugly, but it'll hold. So it's all welded up. I'll hit it with the grinder, clean it up, maybe hit it with primer after that. Okay, so that's where we leave off for today. I am going to check real quick with some 2x4s to see if that's about 3 inches tall to accommodate the floor. Won't matter that much. There's still going to be a piece of angle iron sticking up to block water from coming in. There'll be a seal at the bottom. So, anyhow, this is where we're finished up. Floor to ceiling. It's starting to look like a rough opening for a door. And next step, I'm going to build the rough door frame out of the angle iron. But I'm going to do that separately and just slip it into the opening here and tack it in place with the welder. Okay, I'm looking at these 2x4s. If I scoot one over, should be just about right. Pretty darn close up on a rivet there, but yeah, I'm estimating about 3 inches for the flooring. What I may want to do for the lip at the bottom is actually get a smaller piece of angle. You have to think about the inside lips here. I think I'm going to end up buying some 3/4 or some maybe 1 inch angle. Something a little shallower, maybe even 1/2 inch. Before taking off, I decided to throw a few rivets in this hat channel cap for the door. It'll be where the door hinge connects with angle iron. Okay, I'm back at the bus here. I'm going to clean up this floor space of debris, and I will use some 2x4s to lay angle iron on, and I'm going to use the square to build the frame for the door, or door jamb. It's going to have the 90-degree angle sort of going out so that it acts as an outside flange and the door jamb pushes in from the outside. But we're going to clean up the space a little bit and lay it out right in here on some 2x4s so I have a good work surface. And then I'll mock it up, clamp it, and weld it. So I finished my measurements. It's time to throw a tack in each corner. And then I'll do the measurements and square again. Make sure I'm happy with it, and then weld the beads. Okay, so I have the door frame welded up. Now when it gets put in, it'll most likely be riveted and welded. Riveted from the face to secure sheet metal, and welded at the bottom and probably at the top. I'll probably put a cross member at the top out of angle iron, but I got to see how far it juts out. I'm expecting some, that's why I put the 2-inch square, because I'm expecting some level of this sticking out because of the cant of the windows or the hat channels of the bus. So I don't think it'll be more than 1.5 inches or so, maybe 2 inches, but that gives me a surface to work with to put sheet metal in to make things watertight. Okay, so I'm holding this welded door jamb up into place. I've marked lines here where I need to further cut those rub rails back, and this rippling in the ribs of the bus, or rippled ribs of the bus, they need to be trimmed a bit. And then over here, pardon the camera going all crazy, over here I'm going to notch these right there and there for the rounded part of the hat channel, and I also need to trim the ribs back right here, so I marked a line for that as well. So I'm going to clean that stuff up, and I'm going to grind off my welds, make them flush, you know, and hit this with a coat of primer. Okay, so I have that trimmed back. I'm going to layer in a thin piece of metal to back that with a little bit before we put the door jamb in. It'll slip in behind, just give us something to caulk to. And then we'll probably fill this in with spray foam before I put the door in. Maybe get a few cans of spray foam for this application. I'm going to remove this piece here and spray foam all underneath here as well. So over here I just need to remove these screws and these screws here. Then I'm similarly going to trim this channel back and add in down to here, add a little piece of metal in there, and that should back that one fairly well. Also spray foam inside there. So so I got to pick up a few cans of spray foam. Okay, so I'm back at the bus. Brought a couple kids to help drill holes here. I'm going to lay out with the template and the paint pen all the way down this side for where the holes need drilled. I'm just going to crank them out. Hopefully we can put a couple sheets up. There's Madeline, one of the helpers, and we'll get started. Got the kids working. Alright, so we're making good progress on drilling holes as a team here. I popped some rivets after cutting this old piece of hat channel out of the scrap piece over there. And this is going to go as a double layer on the hat channel cap here, so that where we hinge the door we've got extra strength. So I'm going to rivet that in place and weld it later. Now we have riveting footage of Maddie riveting.
Oh my god.
Pretty awesome,
so
huh?
I go on this side now?
That's pretty good fun, isn't it?
I
got another. Here's another rivet for up top.
Which way do I put it in? This the way?
No.
I
drilled the hole. The fat part goes in the hole.
Okay.
Now step up so you can get all the way in with the rivet. It's just important you push it all the way in before you pull the trigger. Otherwise you got me drilling a rivet out.
Fat part goes in the hole.
Yep. And the hole in the tool has the mandrel or the stem goes in. Push in. Hey, just like a pro. Good job. Let me see the smile that riveting gives you. Okay, so the children helped out quite a bit, and we were able to get all the holes drilled through the hat channels on this side, right down to the driver area here. So at this point, I'm going to clean up the outside with the grinder, and we'll tack in the metal panels on the outside as spacers. And then it's going to take 2 sheets to get up to that cross member right there. And then I'm also going to cut a 30-inch piece to go over by the door where that small gap is next to the first sheet. So anyway, getting the sides finished is in sight here.